And the other ones you're talking about? Good afternoon. I want to thank you all for being here. I know it's hard to sit in a professional development after school, so I do want to thank you for that. I appreciate your help with this, but I did want to ensure that we had this PD to cover guided reading. As you can all see today, we will be talking about guided reading. So we just spoke to district and they are going to be implementing project guided reading. And so with that being said, we have to ensure that we are in compliance. Not only that, as first grade teachers, what is our number one priority for our students? Who can answer that for me? Exactly. Walking out of our classrooms and being independent readers. So before I do begin, did everybody sign in?
Yes.
Okay, and I do have the handout so you can take notes of the PowerPoint. Now, if you have any questions throughout the meeting, please stop me and let me know. So like I said, they're going to be focusing and they're going to be visiting our classrooms. They're going to be monitoring our guided reading block. So this is why we went ahead and we did this today. So just like we do in our classrooms, what I want us to do is, before we begin, I want us to frame our lesson. Since that's part of the fundamental 5, we have to ensure that we're practicing that as well. So I read the we will and you read the
I will.
Okay. So we will review 6 key characteristics of guided reading today. I will observe a guided reading group and share what I notice. So now at this point, I want you guys to turn and talk to your partner, and I want you to let them know what you know about guided reading. I'm going to give you a few minutes to do that. So let's go ahead and begin. Now do your shoulder, partner.
I know that in guided reading that there are different components and one of the components should be work.
I know what guided reading is.
One of the other good components would be like vocabulary and sight words, like having them like do a game and
Level
like
appropriate.
yes. That way it's interactive and fun.
Sorry, I'm just in the habit of doing that because I've always done it in my classroom. So, who would like to share with us what exactly do you know about guided reading? Mrs. Strada?
Guided reading is that special time when you get to actually, you work with the kids one-on-one on their needs and on their level, and doing that through like sight words, vocabulary words, and helping them move levels.
Okay, good job. Anybody else would like to share? Ms. Pierre-Louis?
I'd like to add to that guided reading is a meaningful component of the literacy block.
I love that.
And everything that we do there has to be intentional. And you group, it's small grouping, so you're ensuring that you're meeting the needs, as she said, of your learners. And you give them, at the end of it all, hoping that you give them that confidence, seeing that you had them in smaller settings, giving them that confidence that you can continue to not just practice reading, but have a love for it.
Exactly. I love that. Let's go on and move on to the next slide. Thank you for sharing, ladies. So just like we said, guided reading is a very important component, right? So this component is important for balanced literacy. Our campus adapted balanced literacy a few years ago. I know Mrs. Strada and I have been on this campus for over 7 years.
Yeah.
And so about 4 years ago, we were the pilot campus for balanced literacy. So it was all new to us because honestly, I shouldn't say this, but we weren't doing balanced literacy correctly. So we had someone come in and they modeled lessons and they kind of explained every aspect of balanced literacy for us. So here, if you turn to the screen, we have the different components. And one of the components is what? Guided reading. So we took it by chunks. It's kind of like something that you've always told me, you got to take the elephant by eat the elephant one chunk at a time. So that's what we did when we integrated balanced literacy on our campus. So now, if we look at this, guided reading is essential, but we have other components as well. We have our interactive read aloud, our shared reading, our phonics piece, what Mrs. Strada mentioned, our independent reading, because we're building our first graders to become good readers, and our workstations, which is that this is a very important component within guided reading. Because do we have workstations within guided reading?
Yeah.
Yes, we pull our group, but at the same time, what should be going on in the rest of your with the rest of your students? You should have what? Workstations. What are some of those? How do some of those workstations look in your classroom? Can you talk to your partner about that for a few seconds, please, so we can share? I'm just curious to know what they look like.
So,
Children have choice boards, just for them.
I
So they
have
can
mice,
practice,
Oh.
so they can practice, whatever the
and then I have,
Skill.
will be.
so we do ice station one.
I also have a writing workstation, so they have like 6
The writing
little different topics, so that they don't just have to pick one, they pick the one that they like, and then they get to pick and choose which one they like.
Okay, ladies, I really enjoyed listening to your conversations. Who would like to share with us, not everyone at once, what your classroom looks like as far as workstations during guided reading? Ms. Coca, thank you for sharing.
Okay, so during my guided reading, I had a variety of stations, and they would be extended for a period of time, so the students knew what to do. I would have a reading station where they had choices on what to do with certain books per their reading level, and they already had it color coded. I had a writing station where I incorporated a social studies component, since we don't get to touch on that too often.
Unfortunately.
Right. I had computers where they would test and they monitor their own progress on iStation. I had my small groups, and then I had a center for writing, creative writing. So I would give them a prompt, or they would pick a prompt from a chart, and they would just write their little heart story and draw illustrations.
Because that is critical, especially in the primary grades, because that is where we're building their foundation in order for them to be tested later on. We have to build that and know that that's something that they developed early on at their primary grade levels. Anybody else would like to share what their workstations look like during guided reading?
I just wanted to say, that's like.
She
that would
basically
be
covered
building
it, right.
Capacity, if, you have that critical writing component.
Yes.
Building your thoughts, so.
And adding to that too, like they all, like the writing centers we were talking about, how they had different choices. It's not just one thing that everybody has to write. There's like 5 or 6 different choices, so they can write according to their interests.
And
Not
that kind of
everybody
goes
likes
back
the
to
same
like the choice boards that we were talking about the
Yeah.
other day, right?
Yeah.
That they're able to choose what they want to do as far as at that station.
Good job.
And sorry, ladies, I don't have a clicker, so I have to go back and forth. So let's go ahead and look at this slide. It says guided reading is a highly effective form of small group instruction. That's basically what you guys said when we began. Based on assessment, the teacher brings together a group of readers who are similar enough in their reading development that can be taught together. So when you bring those kids to the back table for the guided reading group, are all of them on the same level? Should they all be on the same level when you bring them back?
Yes.
Why do you think so?
If they're all on the same level, the idea is the struggles might be the same. And if you're intentionally planning to help move them from wherever they are to the next level, you have to make sure that you have like learners sitting at your table. So everybody feels comfortable, nobody is, making more progress.
They feel more comfortable to practice reading.
Exactly.
Because they're all in the same boat or same.
Right.
They're all in the same.
Versus if you have a high one and a low one, and the high one is just reading away while the low one is struggling.
Yeah,
that's exactly that's the word. They're confident.
The heterogeneous grouping though will work when they're out in the workstation.
And that was my next question. I was like, do you do the same thing while they're at their workstations during guided reading?
No.
Mm.
For guided reading, it would be homogeneous, and then the workstation.
And then you just pull students from different
based on
stations.
their color.
Why do we need to do that? Group them that way at their workstations, heterogeneous groups.
Because if you have a group that is typically lost
Mhm.
So when they go out and they're not with you, they're still going to be lost. So you need those hired kids to
To
guide
guide
them.
them.
Yeah, so
Mhm.
model for them what it should look like.
Right, because if you group all of your low babies at the same station and you have instructions for them, they may not be able to know how to read them.
Exactly.
So, or you're not maximizing your instruction time. Good job, ladies. So I have a small clip on why guided reading is so important that I want us to talk about, and then we'll discuss it afterwards. Hopefully it'll play.
Guided reading is so critical because it's designed to meet students exactly where they are in terms of what they need instructionally. So one of the key ideas behind guided reading is finding that just right book. That book that is on his or her instructional level that's going to provide just enough challenge but not too much so that they grow in reading skills. Guided reading books also are different from early readers. A lot of early readers will focus, for example, on sight words. So you'll have a lot of work building that sight word knowledge. Other early readers will focus on phonics, so you have a lot of work developing those decoding or phonics skills. But in guided reading books, they pull all of that together, and they focus on what we call 3 cues we use while we read. For example, when we read, we use what are called graphophonic cues, meaning we use our ability to sound out words using our phonic skills, and also the words that we recognize by sight, learning those high-frequency sign words. So that's one cue that we use. Another cue is what we call semantic cues. Those are related to the meanings of the words. So all the work we do, for example, with vocabulary building, is so that children can use those meaning or semantic cues while they read. And the other cue is called syntactic, and that refers to the grammar. So when we're reading aloud to our children, for example, they get to understand the music of English. They get to understand how English sentences are created, where parts of the sentence would go, for example, the adjective before the noun, those sorts of things. So while they're reading, they're using those cues to really predict what kinds of words would appear in different parts of the sentence. So in guided reading, we practice all of those skills and strategies using all 3 of those cueing systems, which is highly valuable in terms of developing real readers who can do the kinds of reading they need to do, but a teacher isn't there to support them. So we're developing those skills that we have as skilled readers.
Okay, so while I transition back to the PowerPoint, I want you to just discuss within the group what you kind of got from the video, please.
Hello, welcome to my.
Disregard that.
I like how you said that you're teaching them to learn how to do those reading skills when they're not with you, because that's one thing that as a teacher you're always trying to get the students to not depend on you so much. Like, I always tell my group, I'm like, hey, if I'm not here, how would you just, break up the word? How do you know what the word is? And giving them those cues, like, okay, you look at the letter, you look at the sound, and not guessing at the word, and then going back to asking them, like, hey, does this make sense? And going back and rechecking.
So basically what you're saying is kind of like that gradual release model that we talked about. Yeah, good job. Anybody else? Ms. Coca?
Well, I really like how you said that we're always working on different aspects of reading. We're working on grammar. We're working on everything, so they can know how it's supposed to be, how it's supposed to sound.
Right.
Okay.
And one of the things that always resonates with me is that when you choosing that book for guided reading, it cannot be on their frustrational level, but it cannot be so easy that they can read it on their own. So it should be like just right that they're able to struggle just a little bit, and you can give them what they need to be able to move on without you. So I like that part.
Good job. I was gonna say even like the word work and the grammar, like the part that you said actually the same. You don't have to work harder. You can just use that same book and the grammar school that you're working on. You can get it from there as well. Just use the book in different ways.
Kind of what they say, work smarter, not harder, right? Yes. So let's just talk about how your group should look. So in your guided reading group, you should have 4 to 6 students. That's what's recommended. You could possibly have a little bit less, but it is not recommended to have more than 6 students within a group. Why would that be? What do you think, Ms. Williams?
Since they're just small groups,
Mhm.
sometimes we have to focus on one kid and
Right.
while the others read it. It's crowded. It's just too many students.
You probably won't be able to work with everyone within your group, right? And you want to be able to work and assess all of your students when they're at the back table with you, because that's your sacred time with them.
Right.
So what it says, when teachers work with small groups, they are able to identify the strategies each child is using and what instruction is needed when they're at the back. Group interaction enables students to learn from one another, kind of what Mrs. Estrada was saying, and helps them take their thinking to a higher level. So that is why it is always recommended to have about 4 to 6 students within your group. Anybody have any questions so far? Okay, go please. So this goes back to this next slide goes back to exactly what Ms. Pierre Louis was talking about. So let's go ahead and look at that. It says use text at the instructional level of the students in the group. The text level should be chosen and provide the right balance. You hit right on that. Of challenge and support easy enough for students to read most of the story with the strategies that they're being taught that they have, but challenging enough to require some strategy used from the teacher, right? Yeah. So kiss your brain, Ms. Pierre Louis. So we have the different levels that she talked about. So we have the independent level text, the instructional level text, and the frustrational level text. So I want to go ahead and give you some numbers that's recommended. So for the independent level text, they should have 95% word accuracy. For their instructional level text, they should have 90% of the word accuracy. And for the frustrational level, what do you think it would be? Less than 90%. Mm-hmm. And that goes back to what you said. You don't want to choose a text during your guided reading, which will be on the frustrational level text, because you're not going to be able to get to that baby during that amount of time. You have any questions on this? Okay. So next, focus on the reading strategies students need at that point in their development. Guided reading instruction focuses on what the students need to know rather than what a textbook says should come next. It provides instruction in response to student needs, not according to a preset program. So what are you understanding from this? Anybody want to share?
That it's not, there's not like a set curriculum where they that they have to follow. You go accordingly, group them according to what they need. Some of them might be perfect readers, but they need that comprehension, so you need to focus on that. And then some of them need help with the sounding out words and knowing the meanings of words and checking for comprehension and stuff like that, just depending on the levels or what they need according to the group.
Good job. This is, I agree. It's basically telling you allow the learners to drive your instruction at that time. So you may have grouped them based on the level, but when they sit down in front of you, you realize that they may need some work with inflectional endings or beginning sounds or blends or whatever have you. And you will be intentional in teaching them that at that time, using that same text if it fits.
Correct. Love it. So what I asked you I asked you guys to bring in your literacy continuum. And I want us to, because I know we've discussed during planning, this is this is our Bible, our resource that we use to do what? To guide our guided reading groups. So I want us to kind of look at the different levels. So I'm going to give you a few minutes to turn to page 400. So once we get to page 400, it really talks about the instructional level expectations for reading. So I want you to go ahead and look at that. And then for page 402, it's the process of the guided reading lesson. So I want you to notice the behaviors, and I want you to notice what more and more do they have to know to become readers, independent readers. So I'm going to give you a few minutes to do that. Just go ahead and look through those levels, look through the guided reading lesson, and then we can go ahead and just share out. You can talk to your shoulder partner and see, work with them, see what you notice.
I feel like we're in school right now.
Okay, let's go ahead and come back to each other. What did you notice? Who would like to share? What did you notice? What more and more do they need to become independent readers? Who would like to share? Ms. Coca?
Well, to become independent readers, they need to show the progress. They need to show that they're not only reading, but they're comprehending what they're reading.
Exactly. Because, for example, that fluency builds is a bridge to what? Comprehension. So we have to ensure that they're doing that. So this is basically like Ms. Pierre-Louise said, your Bible for you to refer back to what level your student should be at. If you're a kindergarten teacher, it'll let you know what levels you should be at for the beginning, middle, and end of the year. This is also a great resource for when we test our students using what? FAST, right? Mm-hmm. And that is key for us to refer back to it. What else did you read about the aspects of guided reading?
I noticed that the expectations for even just throughout the groups, even the strugglers and the ones who are the high achievers, it's the same. It's the same format for each one. They're just looking for different things. It gave the example that the students that are beginning readers, they have to read like left to right, and they're looking for words.
The concept of print.
Yes, and then the higher readers are doing the same thing, but they're looking at the writer's craft. So they're doing the same thing, but on a higher level.
It's differentiated.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The behaviors are a little differently, look a little different. So your beginning readers, they would be using their finger to keep track of what they're reading, and they want to make sure they're matching what they're seeing to what they're saying, and they're processing it that way.
Yeah.
So that also impacts their fluency in reading.
Exactly.
And those higher readers too, they already have those decoding skills.
Yes.
So when they come to a word that's very complex or they don't know the meaning, they already know how to decode the word.
Right, because they've mastered that skill.
Yeah, so they go back to the stuff that they learned early on. So it's still similar to setup.
And that's what as teachers, that's what we are doing to ensure that these babies are learning these different strategies that they're able to process the information and master it later on, right? Okay, well, I know I have to do this. This word is unfamiliar to me. Let me look at this picture, or let me go ahead and this is the way I can decode it or blend it. Good job, ladies. Let's move on. thing that is very, very important that we always talk about is we are a data-driven campus, correct? So we are constantly collecting data from our students, whether it's a whole group lesson, whether it's a mini lesson, it's a small group lesson. And guess what? We have to do it during what? Guided reading, right? So there are different forms of assessments that need to be completed during our guided reading group. So let's go ahead and look at that. Frequent and consistent monitoring of the progress is essential. Should you keep, if you group your students and you have a group established in August, should you still see those babies in December within that same group?
No, not if there's movement.
Not if there's movement, right? And how do you know that? How are you going to know that? When you're assessing and monitoring their learning. So we have running records that we can use, anecdotal notes, informal observations, and other assessments help teachers determine what students know and what they can do and what they need to learn. So I did ask Mrs. Strada to bring in her guided reading binder because I noticed she had one in her classroom. And within her binder, if you could kind of share with us the different forms that you have to assess your students.
Okay, well, at the beginning, I have just like a little guide to me, which is just a guided reading levels, and then when I'm doing their word work, I'm not always sure where to start with them, so it's just kind of a guide for me where they're reading and where's the best way to start like their word work to get them, reading and to start there with them.
It's a good resource
And
to
then
refer back to.
the binder is separated by groups. So I have 5 groups. So for each one, I have the word work for the guided reading for each group, for each level. I have their cards are color coded by the groups that they're in. So when they're doing like their word games and their sight words, and when we start the guided reading group, this is what we start with first, words that they should be able to see. You should be sounding out these words. I tell them it's like whenever you see your name, you just know it's your name. So I always tell them like the sight words are the same way. It's not, you should be sounding them out.
Right. And I like
really
to tell them that I give them at least, when I work with a group of students, I at least give them 3 seconds. If they don't know those words within those 3 seconds, then you move on to the next student.
And then also assessing them, assessing their reading to see where they're reading at, which words are they still struggling with. Just kind of give them like a cold read, as we say, just to see which words they actually know. And then you can also go back and use this one. I timed it for 1 minute and see their fluency. And then always go back and retest them on the same one to see if they improved and see if they're actually applying those skills. Like I usually like to print out the ones with the pictures to see, especially like for my lower ones, because I always tell them look at the pictures for hints to see if they're actually applying the skills for each one. And then also writing notes on each student as you are assessing them.
Okay, and let me just refer back to the running record that Mrs. Strada had. Our district, as you know, purchased RAS for us, so that is a great tool to use to refer back to use running records for your students. So I went ahead and just printed out an example for you to refer back to. So if you go into RAS, you all have access to it. You choose the level that your students are on, and you click on that and click on the book. It'll give you a running record. And this is very similar to what we do for VAS at the beginning, middle, and end of the year. So it'll also help you in assessing your students and having that different data for them as well. So I'm going to give everybody a copy of this just so you can kind of glance at it. And it's something that should take you, it should be done very quickly. I also want to touch back on the running records. So the big question is, I know as teachers we have a lot on our plate. How often do I have to do a running record? So it is recommended that for your tier 1 students per district, we do it once a month at least. And for our tier 2 students, we do it bi-weekly. And this is district expectation. When I went to one of their trainings, this is the information that they gave us. And let's take a wild guess. For tier 3, it'll be what?
Every week.
Kiss your brain, ladies. It should be done every week. Like I said, this is just a quick assessment when you do the running records to assess their learning.
Tier 2 is bi-weekly?
Bi-weekly, every 2 weeks.
Okay.
And like I said, these running records, if you just go ahead and log into RAS, able to print them out, and it's that easy. Another thing that I have for you is, like Mrs. Strada talked about, this form that they gave us for anecdotal notes. It is something that should be done very quickly when you are pulling your students and doing it independently. I'm going to give it to you just in case you don't have it, so you can keep a copy of it, and then I'll give you a master so you can make copies of it. So what I used to do with my students, and even now when I'm pulling out students, I put stickies on here. That way I won't have to run copies, because I know sometimes we are limited on copies and on ink. So what I do is I typically just put stickies, and I can put them one on top of another. And this is like, for example, my group number 1. So each student has a plus or a minus. What do you think the plus sign would be?
Positive.
What they're doing right during the reading. And your negative is something that they need to work on. So for example, if I assess Miss Williams and I am conducting a running record or taking the anecdotal notes, I will know, okay, well, I noticed that when she's reading, she's identifying most of her sight words. So I would jot that down. Now I've noticed, even though she can identify her sight words, guess where she's lacking? Comprehension. So then that would be her minus, the comprehension aspect of it. So it's just it's just something that you do very quickly. I know it sounds like it's a lot, but it is doable. Do you have any questions so far? Okay. And thank you for sharing your guided reading binder with us, Mrs. Trotter. We'll look at it in depth. Yes. We need to get on the same boat.
If it's thick, it's right.
Yes. Okay, so one important thing that we have to think about is keep the groups flexible and dynamic. What does that mean? Students are placed in groups according to their reading levels and strategy used as determined by teachers' ongoing assessment. We'll get you some water. Groups can change as students grow. Is that what we were talking about? They have to change. And so what I want to show you is, I want to show you a picture of different ways that you should use to place your students. It is something very easy, right? So for example, what I used to do is I had a file folder. Anybody can get a file folder. Do you have an example by any chance in your binder?
Of a what?
Of the way you group your students.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. This is what I was looking at. Yes, it's that easy. We can have a file folder. We group our students either by color, I know some teachers have like an animal theme. And Ms. Kokum, I think you had an animal theme where you had monkeys and bears and cheetahs. So it's very easy for you to keep track of the way you group your students. So, for example, Mrs. Strada has her stickies. So let's say she has all her. What do your groups look like? So
By colors?
By color. So it's blue, green, yellow, red. And this is she's very GT. So this is very easy. In case you need to move your students around, you can just take the sticky off and regroup them. This is something that we did when we were on the same team together. So I see that you kept it. So this is one easy way to group my students and ensuring that I constantly rotate them. Does anybody have any questions? Does anybody want to share any other ways that they group their students?
When I first did this, it was just phenomenal. It was
It's very helpful.
So helpful. Extremely. When you were making it, it was just the whole process of you having to think what group they're going to go in.
Right.
It was like how many students you
and knowing where all of my students are going and
at every moment.
what group.
And just being able to move them around so easily,
Yeah.
not having to completely do a whole new. It was really good.
And one thing that I do recommend, ladies, is I know that we keep this in our guided reading binder, right? But it is also a great visual to have it for students. Not necessarily in that way, but if you post it on a wall or even on a chart paper or a pocket holder, show your students, hey, this is where you're at, this is where you're supposed to be, this is the group, these are the people in your group. That way, in case you're working with your guided reading group, your students won't interrupt you. They can go, Miss, where do I go? Because we know we always have a student, I don't know where to go. Where should I go? He's not on my team, no. Refer back to the chart and that'll help you and allow you to know where exactly to go. And so what we're doing at the end of the day is creating what? Successful and independent learners and readers. So strive to build independent and fluent readers. The instructional focus is on reading strategies, not just questions and activities around a particular text. So when we have our students at the back table, we have to think about what TEKs are our students mastering. Now, how do I know what TEK to pull? How do I know that? When you're working with your guided reading group, okay, I have to focus on monitoring comprehension. So that week, do you pull it according to your scope and sequence? Do you pull it according to what your students need? Do you?
If I'm doing guided reading, it
Mhm.
would be based on what they need. If I'm doing small group instruction, it would be based on whatever the TEK focus is for the week. But if I'm doing guided reading based on, their reading levels, then I'm doing the skill based on what they need.
Right. Because
But
we're trying to meet their needs and
if
closing
I'm doing
their
small
gaps.
groups, that would be different. I'm using another set of data to group them and teach them whatever skill that we're focusing on. So the students will drive that instruction.
Yes. Good job. So we have guided reading expectations. Other than them trying to, other than us having them to become independent readers, this is also something that we have to remain in compliance to. It is a district expectation that we talked about. That is something that the district implemented a few years back to have the balanced literacy component, right? So let's go ahead and look at this. Explicit prompting and coaching of strategy skill previously taught. That refers back to that, right? So how long do I keep these kids in the back with me? 20 minutes per group. Should we go over 20 minutes?
Not recommended.
Why?
The attention span.
Exactly, because for example, if we think about first grade or kindergarten, do you think those students will be able to grasp anything if you keep them after 20 minutes? Because when I think about kindergarten, I always think about my own baby. Okay, he's 6 years old. So I know if I sit at the back of the table with me and I try to drill him or try to, instruct him for more than 20 minutes, he's just going to give up. He's just going to lose everything, right? Then we also have to think about maximizing our instruction time. So let's say I have 4 groups a day, right? And so I keep this group for over 5 minutes, this group over 5 minutes, 5. How many minutes of instruction have I lost? 20 minutes. That's a whole mini lesson, an entire mini lesson. So what happens? You're off schedule, right? You're going to miss some other areas. And so we have to ensure that we're following the district's instructional framework throughout the day, right? Do we have any questions?
I was just gonna add on to, even the rest of the class to 20 minutes would be anything over 20 minutes, they start to lose the interest.
Exactly. I like that you pointed that out. So if I have a workstation where they're going to be sorting or they're going to be writing, they're going to be all over the place. And then there goes your classroom management as well, right? I know that's a big issue that we have, especially with the little ones. They get so
Then you're having to redirect and you're stopping your group.
Mm-hmm. And you know that they should know that that's your sacred time with your students at the back table. So 5 days a week, it is non-negotiable. I know sometimes teachers are like, okay, on Friday, I have to finish my graded assignments. I don't have time. We have to make time. Like we said, it is non-negotiable. We're constantly monitoring, and it's only everything that we do is to benefit our students, right? Level text on students, instructional level. That refers back to what we were talking about earlier, right? On their instructional level. Do y'all have any questions so far? Okay. So let's talk about the structure of the guided reading lesson. So how does that look? Right? So these are the different components. We introduce the skill that we're going over, right? Whether it's monitoring comprehension, author's purpose, what's another skill that we've been teaching in first grade? Inferencing, summarizing, right? Central idea. Right. So we have to focus on, we have to set a purpose, we have to set a focus once they come back to your back table. Okay, boys and girls, today we're going to be working on inferencing and ensure that you are also teaching to that academic vocabulary, right? At all times. You're reading the text with the students. Are you reading it with everyone at the same time? Right. So you're reading with every student independently, and what are you doing while you're doing that? You're taking notes. You guys have been good listeners. You've been, kiss your brain, Ms. Williams. You are taking those anecdotal notes. You're taking those running records. You're collecting that data, right? You're teaching for processing strategies, word work, which, for example, we talked about that could be inflectional ending S words, or what else could we do during that time? Your word work. What is something that y'all have done this week?
Phonics too. Like sometimes when they're reading, they'll be like, "Oh, I see the OU and the OW sound."
So you sprinkle it in at every moment. Okay, so what I want us to look at is, I brought some examples of it, and I kind of want to go over this briefly with you guys. So what's something that the students, you're trying to do is you're ensuring, let me just move this, I got it. You have to ensure that they are fluent readers and that they're able to identify sight words, right? So one game that's recommended that we do with them is the boom card game. That was super new to us when they implemented balanced literacy. So it's a review of your sight word. So before that, sorry, there's just so much information to give you. So if we look at the guided reading lesson plan template, let's go ahead and look at that. I'm going to pass one out so everything can make a little bit more sense to you. If we look at this template, let me borrow yours, please. Thank you, Ms. Williams. You can just look on this token. We have what we do before reading, what we do during reading, and what we do after reading. This guided reading lesson plan template should be in your guided reading binder. This is a non-negotiable. Just like you plan for your other lessons, you also have to plan for your guided reading binder lesson. So, because if you pull the students to the back of the table with you, and you're like, okay, well, let me see what I'm gonna do. Is that gonna work? Is that effective? Are we being effective teachers then? And we have to maximize that instructional time, right? So if we look at the first thing, it is a sight word review, right? We also go over vocabulary. We introduce our, what did we say we do? Our text, right? Our comprehension focus, and our decoding strategy. During reading, we take those, anecdotal notes. And then after reading, we review the skill once again, and we do our word work. So the sight word review game, you pull a list according to their level. So if you go into Curriculum Corner, our district webpage, and you go into guided reading, if we have time, I can show you where to go to in case you haven't done so yet. You look at the dragon smoke sight words that you use. So if you click on this page, it'll give you the grade level. It'll give you what they should be doing during each 9 weeks and what level to refer back to. So this is very important to have in your guided reading binder. So I will also pass this out to you. Please don't leave it behind. So this is where I took my list to make my game. So let's go ahead and play a game, and I'm going to show you how it works. So I have different sight words here. It's called the boom game. So when each student is reading a word, and once a student gets the word boom, what do you think happens then? They get their cards taken away, and it's such a fun game for them to review their sight words. So let's go ahead and try it. Miss Williams.
Over.
New.
Found.
What was that word again? Take.
Only.
Boom.
Boom.
So guess what the student does? You give me all of your cards. You didn't say it, but Miss Puga said it. We take them all away from you, and then we continue. Now, what if Miss Williams does not know what this word? What does this word say, Miss Williams? Lito. So if she's struggling, do I stay with her? I give her how many seconds is recommended?
3 to 5.
Three to five. 3 to 5 seconds, and if she doesn't know it, I move on to Miss Coco. Little. What was the word, Miss Williams? Little. So then you kind of refer back to, because you know you have to reinforce that as well, right? So yes, Miss Coco gets the card because Miss Coco said the word, right? So this is what we do as a sight word review game, and believe it or not, the students absolutely love it. So then at the end of the game, you have them count their cards, and the student with the most cards wins the prize, right? And that's to the teacher discretion. Ooh, okay, we'll play later. Okay, does anybody have any questions so far on that? Ladies, any questions?
Just
Okay.
one thing to add to that, when they play the boom game, like they get like super competitive. So then,
Oh yes,
whoever
absolutely.
wins at the end, I usually just put like a dot on there, and for them, they're like, oh, okay, I got the dot, or I won this round, or something. You know, usually I just give them like a ticket or something for that. So they get kind of
They get very
really into it,
excited.
yes.
Very excited. So like I said, it's recommended to start with your sight words. You introduce your focus, what comprehension you're going over. Then you review vocabulary. It's very important that when you pull your students to the back table and you're giving them a new book, you review vocabulary. Because there's going to be some words, like for example, I went into a classroom and I think the word was swoop. If I give a student a book with that word, do you think they're going to be familiar with it? No. So try to pick some of those words that you think that the students are going to be unfamiliar with as well. Yes, before you start reading with the students, you have to pre-teach some of that vocabulary. And then again, you begin reading with the students. You take anecdotal notes during their reading. You focus again on the skill for that group. And it is also recommended for you to have maybe like an anchor chart. Like I've noticed, I went into teachers' classrooms and they have one on, if they're going over author's purpose, they had an author's purpose anchor chart, a mini little anchor chart at their back table for the students to refer back to. And then at the end, they had their dry eraser boards with their markers to work on the word study. Anybody have any questions? Okay, so before we end, I know you guys are ready to go home. I'm so sorry. I apologize, but this is something that we kind of had to review because of our project. In our library, if you walk in, we have our guided reading library. The district purchased so many books. If you go in there, they are leveled. Okay, they have different levels, and they also have Spanish books for the bilingual teachers. I know that was a huge question that we had. So if you look inside the bagging, they have a lesson plan template. And this is a great guide to use for you to create your lessons. They're literally made for you. If you take this and you are trying to complete your guided reading lesson plan, it's basically complete. It goes over what you're doing before reading, what you're doing during reading. Thank you, Ms. Louie. And what you do after reading. It gives you even things to work on for word work or for writing, because we have to ensure that's part of one of our focuses on campus this year, to ensure that students are critically writing, right? So this is basically your cheat sheet. I shouldn't tell y'all that, but yes, it is, right? Okay. And so what I wanted to do, but I think we ran out of time. We will do this next time that we see each other during a meeting or a planning session. I wanted to show you a guided reading video. It has different examples for you. We had our ELA specialist, the director of ELA, model lessons in different classrooms. So she went to different campuses within the district, and she was able to model some lessons, and they recorded those lessons. So they are very good for you to refer back to. And just as well as if you need a guided reading lesson modeled in your classroom, you can always refer back to who? To your curriculum instructional coach, right? If you have any questions. So I do want to stop here because I know you guys are ready to go home, and we basically covered everything that I wanted to talk to you about guided reading, just to ensure that we are completing this in our classrooms, because they will be monitoring, and that's not the only reason. It is to become what? To have our students become readers, independent readers. That is our number one goal, right? Thank you all for joining me, and if you have any other questions or you have any other comments or concerns, don't hesitate to ask. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
Yeah.